spooky friends, and welcome to another episode of the Scaryish podcast.
Woo!
If you're new here, welcome to your first episode of the Scaryish podcast. Go back and listen to all the other ones.
Indeed. There's no continuity, though, so you can just go ahead and jump in wherever you want, which is kind of nice about a podcast like this.
Yeah.
So, fun stuff. I'm Adam Diaz, and that's Robin Grace, and we're here to talk to you about some very interesting topics that we've done some thorough research on, and I'm pretty excited. Robin, what are you covering this episode?
So this week, I'm going to be covering the Ararat, the A-R-A-R-A-T Lunatic Asylum.
A-R-A-R-A-T Lunatic Asylum? It sounds like some sort of device that the Empire would use to try and crush the rebels.
It's like the AT-ATs.
Exactly.
AT-ATs.
That sounds super interesting. I'm going to be covering something that's a little bit extraterrestrial, and it's the Rendlesham Forest incident. I'm probably saying the location incorrectly, like I do for pretty much everything that's outside of the United States. But yeah, I'm super excited to get to mine. So quick thing I just want to toss out. The episode is a little bit late. We're not exactly over 12 hours, which is not bad at all, but sometimes life happens and things get pushed back, but we are always going to make sure you have an episode to come out. So I am very happy that we're able to get this out to you wonderful folks. The other thing is that it's January, so that means January Patreon push. Go to patreon.com/Scaryish podcast, pretty please, and just check out the tiers. For as little as $1 a month. You get early access and ad-free access to all of our content.
Thank you so much to all of our new patrons. You guys are awesome.
It's really nice to see January Patreon push, which is literally just me, like, saying at the beginning of an episode, like, please give us money, actually have an effect on people who are like, I can give this poor loser $1. I mean, it's 4 quarters, it's once a month, that's not bad at all, so it sincerely does help us, though.
Considering, like, one Starbucks is $5 now,
yeah,
it's insane.
You could even go for a $5 tier or a $3 tier, something around those lines, and see what else you can get. There's some merchandise tiers where stuff gets sent out to you, and it's a really good time, and it really does help us do community events and things like that, and it really makes us keep moving this thing forward and hopefully going up and up and up to a point where we can have more and more content to provide to folks, and it's very, very exciting to see the response to January Patreon push. So thank you, like Robin said, to our new patrons. So
also, I mean, we got discount codes up there. You could join for $1, get a discount code.
Wind up saving way more than $1.
Yeah, get some merch. Do it.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who's been buying merch recently. It's been pretty exciting to see some of that stuff. Go and pre-order, or no, not pre-order anymore. Go and order the pins.
Yep, because I got them all packaged, and they're ready to get mailed out to new homes.
Indeed, and we still have some left, so now is the time to do it, because if they run out, and then you're like, oh, well, I was waiting to do it, but now they're gone, and that's on you, man. That's on you. But yeah, it's really fun to see Robin design all these amazing things and then have them come to life and be created as merchandise for folks to take around, and it's really cool. It's like, it's sort of annoying when we have to ship stuff internationally, and it's also super incredibly humbling, because it's like, I don't know how to write this address, or I don't know how much it's going to cost to ship internationally. It's like, someone international wants something of ours, which is just so cool. So before we keep going, there's 2 big announcements we need to make. One, this week we are going to be recording Storytime episode 102. I think it's 102. Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We've had to scooch them a lot because of vacation and a bunch of other stuff. So this is the last one we're going to do on Thursday for a little while. So join us on Thursday, 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 Central, and then 9:30 Eastern. That said, after this week, we are switching Storytime recordings to a new date, or I should say a new weekly day. We're going to start recording on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m. Pacific, 8:30 Central, and 9:30 Eastern. It's just Robin has school, and when her schedule changes, so does the podcast schedule.
So sorry, everyone, but that's how it goes.
If you've never joined a live story time before because the schedule didn't work out, hopefully Tuesdays are a better day for you, and that would be fucking amazing to see new people come out. It's always super, super fun. For those of you who just listen to the audio episodes and have never watched a live one, those
nothing
won't change.
Changes for you.
Tuesdays are topic episodes. Fridays are story times. That will not change at all. So that will continue.
But our live streams are Tuesdays.
Tuesdays, 6:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So, okay, there's that. So, yeah, I just want to say thank you one more time, and I guess we can just jump into them. So, Robin, go ahead and tell us about the Ararat Asylum, if I said that correctly, which clearly I did.
I can't even say it. Every time I typed it out, I was just like, I don't know how I'm going to say this. So this week, we're going down under.
Oh, God.
So we're going to go to Australia. I'm going to cover a place that I had never heard of before, which is the Ararat Lunatic Asylum. I'm so sorry. I can't pronounce any of that stuff. It's
you got
also,
Lunatic Asylum pretty good, though. You nailed those
got
ones.
that one. Also known as the Ararat Mental Hospital, which is probably more accurate, a name for it, so it's not so, like, non-PC, you know? It's located about 205 kilometers from Melbourne and about 100... That's like 127 miles. So 205 kilometers, 127 miles.
Good conversion. I like this.
Thanks. It's in Ararat, which is a rural city in Victoria, Australia. And these days, these structures kind of lay empty and isolated. It's obviously not used for actual hospitalization anymore. It's mostly just used for the occasional ghost tour.
Okay.
By occasional, I mean multiple times a day.
It's just occasional for the people who go, I suppose.
Right. This asylum boasts to have housed, quote, the worst lunatics of the British Empire, end quote.
Right on.
It has a history that dates back to its construction in 1864 because that's when it was built. I don't know if the land that it was built on had history prior to that, but you never know. Maybe it was like ancient burial ground, and that's why someone was attracted to it and was like, let's build this really horrible place.
It's like all those times where I've done stuff where it's like, you know, it'd go really well here on top of these dead bodies in insane asylum.
Oh my god. It spanned about a whopping 70 buildings upon what is now nicknamed as Madman's Hill, which...
Wait, 70 buildings? Or
Yeah.
70 rooms?
70 buildings.
So this place is enormous.
It's huge.
Oh my god.
Yeah. It had its own farm. It had vegetable plots. It pretty much allowed for segregation from the rest of
It was
society.
self-sustaining.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
This wasn't so much a lunatic asylum as this was like a lunatic city.
Yeah. Well, or town. I don't know. 70 buildings. I don't think that's
I know
a city,
town
is
and
it?
city depends on population. I just thought it was catchier to say lunatic city than lunatic town.
Take me down to the lunatic city.
Lunatic town kind of works. Take me down to the lunatic town. See?
Oh my god.
You're welcome.
What is that, Guns N' Roses?
I don't know. Not the voice I was doing was definitely not Guns N' Roses, but I'm pretty sure
like,
the actual song is Guns N' Roses.
Can you guys make one of this? Can you just take this
God.
and make it into a song for
Please
us?
don't.
Thanks.
Please don't. Sometimes the things we say people actually do. Please don't let that be one of them.
All right. So, though the place is only about 3 hours from Melbourne, it's far enough for people to go to, and then no one ever really wonder what becomes of those people. And this asylum was built to ease up on the cramped jails, and it was built during the time when the British still ruled the Australian colonies. And I don't know if you remember the origins of
It was
Australia,
a penal colony, right?
I mean, I don't even know what that means. But
It's a place they sent prisoners.
okay, yeah. So the whole island of Australia wasn't, or continent, I guess, wasn't necessarily...
I mean, those are both accurate words, so you nailed it twice.
So it wasn't necessarily all prisoners. They colonized it, and then they had one section of Australia made for these newly freed peoples, or these, I don't know, criminals that they sent there. So it wasn't like the whole island was all criminals, you know. But
That's what I've always pictured in my mind's eye, but that's because I've only ever heard stuff from like the American point of view, and I think the extent of my knowledge for Australia and like its origins stopped in like 5th grade, you know?
Yeah.
Because they just don't teach us that stuff
right.
here.
No, I mean, and it's totally understandable. We don't learn Australian history. That's not in our school books, whatever.
Right.
But the whole era of them sending these criminals to Australia was like 60 years before this asylum was built. So maybe that's why their jails were full at the time. There was one source that I read that was like the term lunatic and dissident, which is like the newly freed peoples or whatnot, were like interchangeable. So they kind of treated these people like shit, you know?
Wow.
Which is, I mean, you see these people shipping criminals over, you're like, why are these criminals getting sent to where I live, you know? So maybe that's why their jails were full. Who knows? I obviously don't know. It's all just conjecture. But, yeah, so
1864 is when this thing was built.
1864. There were so many different sources, though. Some were like 1867. Some were like...
It is really hard to find solid dates, because sometimes it's like it was conceptualized on this date, or the construction began on this date, or it was open for business on this date.
There's an official website for this whole asylum thing that you can book the tours from and stuff like that. So if you wanted to check out their website, they do have a bunch of information on there, too. though it was originally designed to house the most criminally crazed individuals, over time it did become... Our dog just...
FYI, if you hear snoring in the background, it's because our corgi is recording with us, and she is snoozing right now.
Yeah. So, over time, it became home for those that were afflicted by different mental maladies, and they could be suffering from something like autism, or Down syndrome, or even epilepsy, which is... there's nothing wrong with you. You know what I mean? All these things. And back in the day, it only took 2 signatures to put you in there, to get you committed.
That's really scary.
Yeah.
It just takes 2 people to say you're crazy, and all of a sudden you're locked up in a place where they won't let you out, because if you try and tell them the truth, you just sound even crazier.
So 2 signatures got you in. It took 8 to get you out. And
that is super unbalanced and very, very strange.
It's just like, how many doctors have to sign off on it, you know? Is it doctors plus a million family members, or is it like a whole chain of doctors? And
can you get inmates to sign for you? Because if so, I mean, like 7 people would be boned, but you could just have everyone get signed out by the same group of 8 people.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, I don't think they would count their signatures, which is also kind of messed up.
You can imagine just kind of going insane over time. Like, you're put in there, there's nothing wrong with you, but you're stuck with maybe a whole bunch of people that are, and it just starts driving you insane, or the doctors are like telling you you're fucking crazy.
Right.
So you start believing you're crazy.
Imagine like a microcosm of being like the rational or calm person at work around a bunch of people who are high strung and like riddled with anxiety, you know,
Yeah.
or like really negative. Eventually that's going to affect you, but like amplify that to the most extreme degree of you're surrounded by people who might actually be lunatics while you're in there like, I shouldn't be here. Eventually you might be like, am I crazy?
I mean, there's a season of American Horror Story about that, isn't there?
I don't know. I haven't watched all of them. I've only watched like here and there. I've picked and chose.
There's one where, is her name Sarah Paulson or whatnot?
Her name is Sarah Paulson.
Yeah. So she goes into the asylum to try and write a news report on what's going on. And she just gets put in there, and then they treat her like she's crazy, and she can't get out. And so she goes crazy while she's in there, I'm pretty sure. Anyway.
You totally didn't pick up on my Fight Club reference, by the way. At
Oh,
some point
sorry,
in Fight Club, like, no one has names, and then, like, Bob dies, and he tells them, like, his name was Robert Paulson. And they all start chanting, like, oh, in death, we have names. And they all start chanting, like, his name was Robert Paulson. I think that's what his name actually was, but that's just what triggered in my brain. Okay. I'm sorry, continue.
Okay, so over the years, it's said that approximately 13,000 people died there. For an institution in place for 130 years, that's an average about 100 people a year.
Wow.
It's a lot of people to die.
That's a lot of people.
So every couple days, it's just like, so-and-so died.
Some places claim they're like the most haunted asylum in the world. I have a feeling this one might be a little bit accurate. That's a lot of death.
Yeah, it's a lot of bodies going through there. I mean, I can't even imagine processing 13,000 people. Ugh, no way. At any one time, it housed around 1,000 patients and 500 employees, which doesn't seem like a bad ratio of employee to patient. But why are there so many people dying? I just don't understand. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, there were different wards, and with so many buildings, it's not surprising. How could you not, right? And these different wards were witness to some bad things. As with many asylums, the use of things like lobotomies, shock therapy, stuff like that, nothing out of the ordinary. Stop reading my stuff.
I'm not reading it. I'm trying to... I have this thing with this new microphone because it picks up a lot that I have to aim my face away from it if I'm breathing. Because I sincerely don't want it to be like...
Just in the background, have it be like a...
Creepy fat guy ASMR.
Okay, so take the J Ward, for instance. It was built in 1859 as a county jail for Victoria. And not the person, the place in Australia. In December of 1886, they renamed that jail to the J Ward, and then it became part of the asylum. So it was meant to house all of their criminally insane and was obviously witness to plenty of cruelty. And it was a jail for a little while, but then they stopped using it as a jail. Like, they didn't have any more funds to take care of, like, actual inmates, I guess. So they turned the jail over, donated it to the mental asylum. The mental asylum took it, turned it into J Ward.
So they just took this building that was previously used as a normal jail. They thought very creatively to give it the name the J Ward.
Yeah.
And then they just made it house like the most crazy of the crazies.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's held both the youngest and oldest criminals in Australian history, supposedly. Boys as young as 12 were sent to the J Ward. So imagine these 12-year-olds among these, like, much older, probably more intense people, you know? I just can't even imagine.
I gotta say, it's really hard to imagine a 12-year-old doing something so shocking that they would wind up there.
What if they, like, trigger warning, but what if they murdered, like, one of their siblings or their parents, you know? As
much as it's hard for me to imagine someone at 12 doing something like that, I will say recently, like in the last couple months, I've played my first ever Call of Duty game.
Oh, my Atlanta.
I've heard a lot of 12-year-olds tell me some pretty horrible shit on there. Say to you? I mean, typically it's just either calling me something about my sexual orientation or telling me to go fuck my mother. So, the thought that a 12-year-old could say that, it's like, I understand that they're capable of horrible things.
If you're a kid out there, you shouldn't be listening to this, one. But if you're playing Call of Duty, think of something more creative. That's just stupid. Like, boring. Boring.
In 12-year-old's defense, so there's this game that existed called Bravely Default. It was for the 3DS, and there's this feature with 3DSs where if you pass by someone else who has one, you basically, like,
oh my God,
you pick up, like, a greeting from them.
I just
like,
remembered
hello.
What you typed into
and
your
Bravely Default had this feature in the game where you could, like, basically load a character where if you walk by someone else who's playing Bravely Default, you could use an extra attack, and it looked like your character in your game, and you could pick a catchphrase for them to say when they attacked. And of course, like, Nintendo has a profanity filter, so it was very hard for me to figure out what I was going to put in there. But, like, 31-year-old Adam made it so that when my character appeared, it was like, suck my balls! And then it would attack.
Oh my God.
So, yeah, I kind of understand the 12-year-old mindset still, so. Okay, I'll let you keep going.
Oh my God. Anyways, to be admitted to the J Ward, you had to be either convicted of murder, accused of murder. You didn't have to be convicted. You could be accused of murder. You could be too violent to be placed in a traditional prison, or you were sentenced in Victoria and then became an insane person while in prison. What?
There's a lot of ways you can wind up losing your life here.
It's just insane. I mean,
losing your life as being, like, incarcerated forever in this place.
Oh my God. It's just, why? So the J Ward was the location of the hanging of 3 prisoners, supposedly, and that is a big ol' supposedly, because I don't have any of the documentation. It's just been said over and over and over again, you know what I mean? So it becomes legend in this thing.
Right.
And a whole lot of other people died on the J Ward, not just these people, obviously. Supposedly, these 3 were not given a proper Christian burial because they were murderers, and they were buried upright, which means they were standing up, which is like a double diss, you know. You don't get to be in consecrated ground. You're put in an unmarked grave, and then you got to stand up forever.
That's funny.
So
no laying down for you, jackass.
Okay, imagine when they start to decompose, and then there's nothing to hold it up, right? So the meat just starts flopping to the bottom, and then it just pulls the bottom of the box.
This is pretty much the grossest thing you've ever described on the show.
But then there's nothing holding the bones together too. So the bones start, like, clattering into around in the box. And
I think you're just annoyed that if someone were to open this coffin, it would be a pile of bones rather than, like, when it's laying down, it's like a really nice skeleton.
Yeah, it's just rude. But there are signs that mark the burial locations in the exercise area. So they didn't even get to be put anywhere cool. It's like, exercise area, put them there. It's cool.
They have prisoners sweating on top of them for all eternity.
Yep.
Well, I mean, obviously not because it's closed, but still.
Rumor has it that because they, much like many murderers, were buried vertically, are never allowed to rest. So their souls haunt the prison, not being able to move on forever. The J Ward was known for keeping pretty notorious patients. There was one named Bill Wallace. I don't know what he was really, if he was really notorious, but that's just what the internet says. You believe everything they say on the internet. So this one guy named Bill Wallace was never convicted. He was never even tried for what he supposedly did, but he was reported to have shot a friend over a cigarette. I don't know. Maybe the friend didn't want to give it up.
But did he kill him?
I don't know. I don't know if he actually died. Maybe. I would assume he did die, though. Because why else would you be put into this mental asylum?
I don't know. I mean, apparently all you need is two people to say, yeah, he did something crazy, and then you're locked up in there, so.
Oh, true. Well, if he did kill this person, then they probably would have hung him too, right? For being a murderer?
Yeah.
Two separate doctors declared him to be quote-unquote crazy in 1925. He spent...
I like that that's a diagnosis.
He spent 64 years at the asylum and died in 1989 at the age of...
1989 or 1889?
1980. He was declared crazy in 1925, died in 1989.
Oh my God.
He was 107 years old.
Holy shit.
So this guy was 107, and they still kept him there.
Their plans were to keep him there until he was just actually crazy.
It's like a big thing to point out, the fact that he's 107, because it's, you don't leave there unless you're dead. You know, you're stuck there. It's a super morbid like concept, but you can imagine that many of those that were interned there under pretenses like hysteria, where their husbands were simply sick of them or thought they were annoying or wanted to date other bitches, whatever. Or having things like autism where you can't control it. There's not really anything wrong with you, but you're stuck there for the rest of your life.
Because you're different.
That's
super fucked up.
And a lot of these people would eventually be driven to suicide to escape things like the nonstop lobotomies or the shock therapy or any of the other cruel treatments that they had to endure. And things like lobotomies were done often without any type of anesthetic. So imagine how that fucking feels. I can't even imagine.
I don't want to imagine.
I don't want to
imagine.
That's
horrible.
There's a quote from the Inspector General of the Insane from 1908. And I can't believe there's a person whose job is literally Inspector of the Insane. I mean, how do you even get that job? They said, quote, "Its continuance as an adjunct to a mental hospital in this, the 20th century, is more barbaric than barbarism," end quote. Talk about savage.
That was 1908, you said?
That's in 1908. This guy was like, this place is awful.
place is
awful. How can you keep running this? This is 20th century.
This place is awful. Let's keep it open for like another 90 years or so.
It's a museum now, so you can see the history of the place, but it's also super duper haunted and is said to be home to a number of ghostly inmates that are there to scare anyone who enters. And there are reports of people feeling shoved, scratched, even bitten while they were in the J ward. People have heard sounds like banging, like a continuous banging, as if patients were banging their heads against the walls in their cells, type of thing.
That kind of banging. Got it.
Oh my God, did you think like...
I was very confused there for a second, I'm sorry.
Something that was supposedly a common occurrence during the days of operation were these patients just trying to get out, you know? So, not surprised. They've heard distant shrieking and the sound of clocks ticking where there are no clocks. There are understandably a lot of legends that surround the asylum. One of these is that of a Gary Webb. Legend has it that he mutilated himself over 70 times in his cell, screaming to be let out of the room.
That's horrible.
Those that have entered his cell have been told to, quote-unquote, get out by an invisible entity. Other cells are known to have a strange influence on those that enter. So feelings that range from just nausea, which it seems to happen a lot in strange places, right? Or terror, and then trance-like states that don't go away until you go away. So until you leave the building. That, I think, is really scary. But how much of that is in your mind? You know what I mean? Where you kind of psych yourself up, and you're like, this is terrifying, I really don't want to be here. And you tighten yourself up, and you just make yourself sick, and then you don't get relieved until you leave, and you're like, I'm safe, whatever.
The only way to really test that is to tell someone about the legend of a place that has like all these horrible things happen to it.
But not actually have it had anything.
Yeah, but it's just a normal place, and then you take them there and see if something happens, or if they're like, oh yeah, I don't feel anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
something that I think is the typical thing to happen in these haunted places is electrical problems. So different electrical devices and cameras seem to stop working. There have been photos that supposedly had shadow figures show up in them. I didn't see any of these shadow figure photos, so I mean, take that with a grain of salt. In the men's ward surgery area, people report headaches or unexplained pain. Some have felt like a strange numbing feeling in their heads, maybe like resonating shock therapy type stuff.
Oh, wow.
The office of the facility director has unexplained cold winds come from it, free air conditioning, but whatevs. Down in the kitchen is the spirit of a boy they call Stuart, and he's said to haunt the kitchen along with a former cook. Now that the kitchen is no longer in use, though, not much to haunt. Like, no pots and pans to bang together. Boring.
It's like if a tree falls in the woods, is there anyone there to hear it? What happens
Right?
when a haunted place is completely abandoned? The ghosts are just bored as shit.
Apparently, the governor's bathroom is no exception to the hauntings. Many staff and visitors refuse to enter the room, claiming to sense a palpable evil within, and it's thought to be some type of demonic force that possesses the room. At least one prisoner is said to have been murdered and dismembered in the bath.
Oh my god.
So I guess when they say governor's bathroom, it's not necessarily the governor's bathroom when he's in the area, it's just like the name of that particular room.
That would make more sense,
yeah,
why
so-
that stuff would happen in the governor's bathroom.
Right. Either way, dark things definitely must have happened there. The ghosts of one too many terrible shits.
Wow.
Feeling like you're being watched in the women's ward, some have reported seeing ghostly nurses in white uniforms wandering this woman's wing. Ghostly nurse Carrie is said to be Kerry. It would be funny if it was the other way around, though.
What other way around?
Carrie, Carrie, like the movie.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a ghostly nurse Carrie is said to be the ghost that stares at visitors until they leave.
I gotta go ahead and say that I'm pretty much that ghost when it comes to going to a restaurant when people are taking too long at their fucking tables and you're waiting.
You mean that sushi restaurant?
Yeah, that sushi restaurant on Friday. I stared at people like, pay for your food that you already ate and get the hell out. Okay, sorry.
So, there are also reports of hearing ominous moaning and crying, even the screaming or the occasional sound of footsteps. And when I read that, I just imagined hearing the sound of heels down a distant hallway, you know? I don't know if you folks have ever heard the sound of heels clicking down the sidewalk or whatever.
I'm sure you have.
But I wear heels a lot, so I hear that a lot. And when I read that, I was just like, that's what I hear. I hear a nurse in some white outfit just click-clacking down the hallway. In this wing, you might even feel the soft touch on your hand or your face. Our dog sighs so loud. Okay. So, legend has it that a sad ghost named Old Margaret resides in the building as well. She was a patient most of her life, but escaped in the 90s when the building closed. She supposedly knew nothing else outside of the institution, so her ghost came back after her death to what she knew best.
See, that makes sense to me, because I'm usually like, your ghost, supposedly in my brain, will haunt the place you die. But in this case, it's like, when you know nothing else. It's like when you have dreams about the place you grew up or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
It's like it's the place that you're most familiar with, so it would make sense for that to be where your spirit would, like, I don't know, wind up at.
Yeah. There's a bridge that spans to the men's ward, and this bridge is known as Suicide Walk. There weren't a lot of details on it. It just said, like, people used it to escape, so I assume they would, like, jump off the bridge or something like that. Supposedly, unsuspecting individuals may experience ice-cold hands reach out and grab them while they're walking on it. And then you move on to the men's ward itself. So, the superintendent's office is known to be haunted as he did die by committing suicide. I sent Adam the article so he can post it on our Instagram later.
Right on. Sounds really happy.
Yeah, so...
Sounds like Shawshank Redemption.
He swallowed some cyanide.
Okay, never mind.
So, yeah, not like Shawshank. Even he wasn't immune to how horrible a place this was. You know, I'm sure he saw all the things that happened there, and he's just like, I'm out. Visitors say that they experience an unpleasant, bitter taste in their mouth while walking past his office, and even experience, like, an immense nausea. So it's like they're tasting what he tasted when he died.
Is cyanide bitter? I don't know if anyone can test that and confirm. It's like, yes, it's only bitter. Ugh. It's like he sacrificed himself so we could know.
The asylum closed its doors in 1993, but it seems like those that were incarcerated there just can't leave.
Aw.
During its refurbishment between 1997 and 2001, workers that were spending about 10 hours a day within the walls of the asylum started having violent outbreaks. Men that had been friends like their whole lives, for some reason, were just at each other's throats. So I don't know if you guys want to spend a lot of time there, but you can take tours of the asylum and J ward. More than 10,000 people visit every year.
Ironic, because that's the number of people who died there.
Well, 13,000, but yeah.
Holy shit.
They even have a certificate of excellence from TripAdvisor. So there's supposed to be some sweet-ass ghosts.
Wow.
Just saying. Like, how does an insane asylum, like a ghost tour get that? But must be cool. You can tour a good portion of it, except for 30 hectares, which is a lot of land, in the northeastern quadrant that was gifted to establish the Australian College of Wine, along with vineyards and an olive grove.
That's some haunted-ass wine,
I
for
know.
sure.
I wonder if when, you walk around the trees or the vines or whatever, if you can see ghosts, just walking.
I don't know. I feel like they'd be stuck in the prison, if they annexed that part of it and made it someplace that was free.
But what if they tore it down, and made it the College of Wine?
I know what you're saying. I feel like because they're prisoners by, nature, they would be stuck in the prison portion of it. They wouldn't be able to, wander around a really pretty vineyard for all eternity.
But isn't it... So I believe that ghosts kind of just follow what they walked when they were alive.
Like how they walk the pattern of the floor plan,
Yeah.
that type of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
But I mean, haunted college campus. I wouldn't want that. If my college were haunted, I would never want to stay late. And big ol' noopy noop. It's strange to think that this place operated into the 90s, because it's really not that long ago.
Yeah, that's why I was shocked. I thought for sure the dates just got mixed up on that. When you said that it was during the 90s, I was like, holy shit, this place is open for a really long time.
Yeah. There were people getting tortured when I was born. It's insane.
For most of us, I think. A lot of us that listen, this place was still open and horrible things were still happening there.
Yeah.
When we were alive, which is crazy when this was built in 1864.
Yeah. But yeah, that is the history and story behind the Ararat Lunatic Asylum or the Ararat Mental Hospital.
Right on. That was really stinking good. Thank you, Robin.
Thanks.
All right, so before we move into my story, I'm going to go ahead and take, or I guess we all are, you two are going to take a quick commercial break. Hers are better. All right, we are back. So this week has been a pretty crazy week for us, and honestly, I was not sure what I was going to cover. Anytime I'm not sure what I'm going to cover, I always want to cover the same thing, a cryptid. But I have legitimately seen a bunch of stuff in the news lately regarding extraterrestrials and unidentified flying objects, so I felt a bit inspired to look into an incident with possible life from beyond Earth. I did not want to dig into anything too recent, because when I investigate stuff that is recent, I sincerely feel like I'm being watched when things are too fresh.
Well, that's terrifying.
So I'm just I just get really creeped out by it, because it's whether or not something actually happened, I feel like someone's paying attention to my search history, and I don't want to search everything in an incognito tab because I'm just lazy and it doesn't remember your stuff. Anyways, so instead I took a suggestion from a listener. So shout out to Pippin on Discord for suggesting this. It really is just that easy to get us to cover a topic that you would like to hear us cover. Is you just suggest it to us. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and we have a channel in our Discord called Topic Suggestions. That's where I found this one. So that said, I will be covering, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the Rendlesham Forest incident. So before we begin, the normal disclaimer that this could all be bullshit. There is definitely something that happened here, but what it was is always up for speculation. That said, I'm sure you have some questions floating around about what I'm about to cover, so let's cover the obvious stuff from what I have already said. First, I mentioned that I didn't want to do anything recent, and this definitely qualifies. The events that I will be discussing took place in 1980. So 5 years before I was born, and FYI, for those listeners my age, all I know is when I hear 1980, I think, 20 years ago. It's actually 40 years ago now.
Oh,
so,
gosh.
We're old. And y'all remember 1980, though? The average cost of a house was $68,700.
Shut the front door.
Gas cost $1.19 a gallon. And the average household income was $19,500.
Jeebus.
What else happened in 1980? Mount St. Helens blew the fudge up. The Rubik's Cube came out. That also blew the fudge up. Everyone loves those things. And John Lennon was murdered.
Oh, no.
Side note,
no, thank you. 1980.
People suck. So that's the when. How about the where? Well, I mentioned that it was a place called Rendlesham Forest, and you might not know where that is located, and it would be Suffolk England. So this is taking place in the UK. Now, the spot in particular where this takes place is between the RAF Woodbridge, which is the Royal Air Force station known as Woodbridge, and the RAF Bentwaters, which is also a Royal Air Force station. Shocker. A few things to note about this, because it is definitely going to be important, is that the area of the forest this took place was between these two Air Force bases. However, it took place closer to Woodbridge. Another thing to note is that despite them being Royal Air Force bases, they were at the time occupied by the United States Air Force. If you're like, why would they be occupied by the U.S.? The Cold War. That's why. They were just bases that were lent to us because we were stationing a bunch of stuff all around the world. So this event is, per Pippin in the Discord, and literally everything I saw online, referred to as, quote, Britain's Roswell. So it is a very well-known incident, just not to me, because I'm a stupid American.
Oh my god.
So what happened? Well, on the night of December 27th, 1980, and by night I mean early morning, because this took place at, according to all records, 3 a.m. on the dot, soldiers from Woodbridge patrolling the perimeter reported strange lights making their descent through the sky towards the forest.
Do you think the aliens were like, guys, watch this?
No.
Because they're like, it's 3 a.m., come on.
I think it was like, guys, let's go mess with some humans. And you'll understand why here in a second. So at first they thought it was some form of aircraft crashing because the light pattern was weird and it was descending rapidly. Because of this, they entered the forest to locate the aircraft once it had fallen below the tree line and possibly rescue or recover any crew that might be there. So it's literally the witching hour. If you're picturing this like a movie, it's literally the witching hour, middle of the light. You see crazy lights in the sky rapidly coming down. They land in the forest, and then several soldiers, like that shot of them like walking into the forest, and they're just going in there to check out what it is. This is a straight up horror movie beginning. They trekked through the woods to what they believed to be the crash site for the aircraft, but instead they found something very odd. There was not an aircraft crashed there. On the forest floor was a triangular-shaped, glowing craft. It was 10 feet across and 8 feet high. It had three legs that extended from each point of this triangle, sticking into the ground as if it was like landing gear. So there is a picture online of a statue/monument that was placed in this area, and I'll post that on the exact spot. Okay. And I'll post it on our Instagram so you can get an idea of what this looks like. The best way I can describe it is if you mixed a UFO and a planchette from a Ouija board, and it was 10 feet across and 8 feet high, and the middle of it is like bubbled like a dome, so it almost looks like a cockpit. And obviously 10 by 8 is not very large. It's almost like the
size of this room.
It's like an individual like spacecraft. You can't fit a whole lot of people in there. And the cockpit doesn't take up the whole aircraft, though. It just takes up like the center of it.
Yeah.
So, and this room's a square. Imagine if it was a triangle, you know?
Yeah.
Far less space. So, and now everyone knows how fucking small our room is that we record in. Aside from being absolutely bizarre and unlike any aircraft they'd ever seen, the craft was also glowing, which is not normal. And the commander of RAF Woodbridge was a man named Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt. I don't know why I keep calling him Holt. I'm pretty sure it's because of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But if I say Holt during this, I meant Halt. So when the events occurred, and yes, I said events, it was kept classified at the time. A few years later, in 1983, a document that was sent regarding the incident after it took place was actually declassified and made available to the public. It was a letter that Lieutenant Colonel Halt wrote regarding the incidents, with an S. Here's a quote regarding the craft. This is directly from him.
The craft? Like the witchcraft?
He loved that movie so much. No, seriously, this is about the UFO that they found. The individuals reported seeing a strange glowing object in the forest. Again, this is a memo he wrote to his superiors to let them know what happened here because it was very widely known that something happened. The object was described as being metallic in appearance and triangular in shape, approximately 2 to 3 meters across the base and approximately 2 meters high. It illuminated the entire forest with a white light. The object itself had a pulsating red light on top and a bank of blue lights underneath. The object was hovering or on legs. As the patrolman approached the object, it maneuvered through the trees and disappeared. So it basically like came to life and was like, I'm getting the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
At this time, the animals on a nearby farm went into a frenzy. The object was briefly sighted approximately an hour later near the back gate. So it's going around this Air Force base, which is obviously a matter of security. Like, they're freaked out about it. So those are the words of the person in charge of this base. Now, additional details on the account supposedly leaked from the soldiers who encountered the craft. And again, I use the word supposedly, which has a D, not a B. If you're saying it with a B, stop. Supposedly is not a word. Supposedly is the word.
Seems like this alien craft was just all about that base.
I hate you, but that is 100% accurate and a really good pun. So, when the craft began to maneuver through the trees, of course, this is conjecture, the soldiers started chasing the thing through the forest because they're like, what the hell is this? Let's catch it. And at some point, the craft came into a clearing. And when it did, rather than zigzag through the trees, because there was not a lot of trees around it, but more importantly, there was no canopy blocking it from the sky, it shot straight up in the air. And it is said that when this happened, it shined a light down, or lights down, on the soldiers that were incredibly bright. And this thing is apparently all about lights, because it was like glowing in the forest, it glowed in general, and it shot lights at these people. When the lights were shined on these people, they all passed out. They fell unconscious. When they came to, they were back in the thick of the forest, not in the clearing. So that's creepy, and it sounds a little bit like abduction shit, you know?
Yeah.
If you hear sneezing, that's our dog under the fucking table. Now, this story is certainly crazy enough to get the nickname of Britain's Roswell, despite the fact that there wasn't a crash, just because there was an encounter, and it happened with military.
Yeah.
So the main difference here is that, you know, it didn't crash. It just sort of landed, and then instead, like, noped the fuck out when humans showed up, which I totally understand, because I do the same in any social situation that I'm able to. If I could just shoot up into the sky and spray lights on people, I would absolutely do that.
Sounds gross.
It does, because I said spray. But like I alluded to earlier, there is more to this story. So the next day, they had a few folks go out to look at the site where the soldiers who had entered the woods during the incident encountered the craft. They observed, quote, 3 depressions, 1.5 inches deep and 7 inches in diameter, where the object had been sighted, and they were in a triangular pattern. So these are the legs that it basically landed on. So on this day, they identified the touchdown site, and that's about all they did. And I don't think they hung around long that day, because they wound up going back the next day, which would be December 29th, to investigate the site in a more official sense. So they returned properly equipped to check for radiation. Here's the thing about this. There is an actual tape that was made, and by tape I mean an audio tape, of the investigation that was done that was eventually released that lets you hear when they are investigating this landing.
Wow.
This is something that happened, and it was a recording made by HALT. So it was made by the most senior officer on that base and the commander in charge of that base. So they went out there to investigate for radiation. Here's the thing about checking for radiation. The only thing I know as a person about checking for radiation is you use a Geiger counter, and it's like, it makes like the grudge noise, basically, if it finds something.
Isn't it more like clicking?
Yeah, it's clicking mixed with grudge noise. For all I knew, it could be a needle on a scale that ranges from this place fucks to this place does not fuck.
Oh my god.
In all caps.
If you guys have no idea what he's talking about, go watch the live Storytime episode this past week.
It was just a hashtag that we were using on our vacation about someone like being awesome. Like, this dude fucks. So anyways, use that, please. It's hilarious. Someone already used it. Someone commented on our last episode that came out. I was so happy. So what I know now about measuring for radiation, and I will share with you, is that there are a bunch of different units to measure radiation by, and the unit that they measured this by is different than the unit assumed by a bunch of websites on the internet. So, without getting way too sciencey on this, a lot of places claim there was absurd amounts of radiation that could never have happened, which in some aspect is true, but it's not exactly accurate. So, Lieutenant Colonel Halt read off these readings. You can hear them. He actually wrote them officially in his memo. The trees that were facing the landing site were exposed to whatever this craft was. They measured to 0.05 or 0.07 millirentgens, which is one of the measuring units. They measured the actual site where the craft had landed and those 3 depressions in the ground, and then the center of where like that cockpit would have been, and that measured at 0.1, so almost double what the trees had experienced. It is not a super high dose of radiation. It is not naturally occurring, certainly not in that area, and it didn't exist prior to that.
So it's not enough to make anyone sick. It's
Correct.
It
shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not something where it's like, oh my God, you're going to get sick if you're around this. But it is something where it is alarming. The readings where the craft landed are roughly 10% that of what like a dental x-ray would expose you to, which, if I remind you, like my experience with a dental x-ray is they shove a bunch of shit in your mouth, they throw a lead blanket over your tits and your crotch, and then they dive behind a wall to press a button because they don't want to be exposed to that radiation. So it's 10% of that. But it's not a directed laser at you. It's literally just emitting that.
I just thought of this now that you bring it up. Why don't they cover our arms or anything else? Or like our brains?
I think it's because of your heart, and it's because of your genitals. They don't want any sort of like radiation exposure. But as far as your arms go, they're like, yeah, you can get some tumors on your arms, no big deal.
What about my brain?
I don't know. I mean,
they're shooting radiation straight at your head.
I mean, they can't put like a helmet on you that only comes down to your like mouth, and they're like, yeah, go ahead and smile. You look like the Joker. You look like the Batman who laughs. You're terrifying.
Oh my God. Okay.
So anyways, 10% that of a dental x-ray was just like radiating off of these areas. It's not like it was focused, and this is 2 days later, so it is bizarre. And of course the internet basically decides that they're going to put this in a measurement that would be around 10 to 100 times higher for the sake of drama, but I'm trying to keep things accurate here. So what we have here is a bunch of military out in the woods measuring a UFO landing site and picking up radiation levels that, while safe, should absolutely not be there. It is also, by the way, and I don't know why he chose the time for this, nighttime. There is not an exact detailed time that they went out to do this investigation, but while this is occurring, it is night outside. And as if this was like some sort of movie, while they're measuring this, and you can hear like the Geiger counter taking the readings, lights start being seen in the sky again. So 2 days later, another incident occurs. So I'm going to give you Lieutenant Colonel Holt's official account of the events that occurred. Then I'm going to give you the stories that have come out since from the other personnel present at the time of the incident that could be speculation. So according to Holt, quote, a red sun-like light was seen through the trees. It moved about and pulsed. At one point it appeared to throw off glowing particles and then broke into 5 separate white objects and then disappeared. Immediately thereafter, 3 star-like objects were noticed in the sky, 2 objects to the north and 1 to the south.
What do
so
they
it's
mean
again
by
in a triangle
star-like?
formation, like bright white lights in the sky.
Okay.
So,
I mean, I didn't know if it was star-shaped or...
What's a star shape?
5-pointed star.
No, it's like they're describing actual celestial objects, none of which are actually star-shaped. So the objects moved rapidly in sharp angular movement and displayed red, green, and blue lights. The objects to the north appeared to be elliptical through an 8 to 12 power lens. He's describing the level of lens that they used, the zoom level it had, basically. They then turned to full circles, so they changed the shapes they were. The objects to the north remained in the sky for an hour or more. Our dog just sneezed all over my foot. The object to the south was visible for 2 or 3 hours and beamed down a stream of light from time to time.
Did you say beamed?
Beamed down a stream of light from time to time. This is extremely important. Don't make fun of it, because it's going to come back up. Numerous individuals, including the undersigned, witnessed the activities in paragraphs 2 and 3. After describing this, he states, other people saw this shit, not just me, but including me, and then he signed his name directly underneath that paragraph.
Wow.
And that's the end of the memo. The memo is known as the Halt memo. So yeah, some crazy shit happened in these woods the second night as well. According to rumor, it's crazier than you would think. So, and it's never like, according to rumor, everything's actually really okay, because no one spreads rumors like that.
It was just
boring.
a druid using Moonbeam.
Yeah, it probably was. I totally listened to Adventure Zone, and one of the characters is a druid this season, and he used Moonbeam, and I was like, oh my god, it's so satisfying to hear. So according to rumor, a small group of airmen were dispatched to the woods to investigate the pulsating red light when it appeared before it split up and scattered. Halt's group basically stayed at the site that it had originally landed to take measurements. This other group was sent to investigate just what the F it is. So they saw it. When they saw it, they radioed to Halt's group and let them know what they were seeing. And then it started to move. And Halt's group...
That's terrifying.
Halt's group then saw this thing moving through the forest towards them, not just glowing red anymore, but pulsating out a myriad of different colors all over the spectrum, basically what sounds like a rainbow, like my keyboard. And they freaked out. These lights then scattered and took to the skies, where they were observed by the active military in the woods, those back at the base, and locals around the area for several hours. For hours. The official word of this incident was, of course, stated to be nothing out of the ordinary. When they finally made a statement, they said that it was pieces of a meteor breaking up in the Earth's atmosphere because a meteor had been observed on the 26th during the original incident.
Meteors don't have, like, movement like that.
They don't persist for 2 whole days and then go away and come back. So I'm not sure how that could be the case, unless it happened multiple times and just happened to hang in one spot while it burned. So it took 3 years for this memo that I've been quoting from to be released to the public. A year after that, in 1984, is when Lieutenant Colonel Halt was replaced by a Colonel Sam Morgan. He was the one who released the audio tape of Halt investigating the site. You can find that on the internet if you want to. It's exactly what you'd expect to hear of someone investigating a site, taking readings, a lot of narration, not a lot of creepy stuff. They do take notice of abrasions to the trees around the site. They find it very interesting.
So kind of like, say, if some engine came through and was like burning.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there's speculation on what those abrasions could be from. People think that it was hunters like marking trees by taking like a hack out of it, and then like the sap would pool and it would look like it was a burn mark.
Yeah.
So that's where our dog keeps sneezing down there. But that's where some of the speculation comes from there. Once they took notice of the abrasions, they also wound up taking samples from the trees and from the soil where this thing had landed. And you can hear them when he instructs them to take the samples. I have scoured the internet, and I cannot find any information regarding any tests that were run on the soil or the trees, or what the results were. Despite the fact that it's in the audio, it is literally not mentioned in anything I can find.
That's weird.
At all. So that is really weird. Some eyewitnesses claim that they investigated strange lights they saw in the woods on the 26th, but after following it for 2 miles at 3 a.m., they spotted a lighthouse in the distance and decided that's where it was coming from. So there is reasonable skepticism surrounding this from the people in the area as well, who only saw the lighthouse, which to me doesn't make sense, because if you're from the area, you would know there's a lighthouse there and you wouldn't follow it for 2 miles at 3 a.m. just to be like, oh, it's the lighthouse that's existed this entire time.
Yeah.
So that seems really weird. And the other thing about those tests is if they came back negative for results, they would just say so, since they released so much information on this.
They must have found something.
It's just really weird. They found probably something that was inconclusive and didn't want to mention
anomaly.
that.
Yeah.
So it gets a little bit nuts now. One dude claims that he altered a police vehicle and drove it around the woods.
What?
So that he could cause a panic, basically.
That's bullshit.
When this was investigated, it was found he had altered a vehicle and changed the color of the lights, but he could not have driven it around the woods on the 26th, 27th, 29th, any of the days that something was seen, because he was elsewhere entirely. So basically, he made up a story about how he was the cause of it, which is weird because, like, I guess maybe you just want attention, but why would you blame yourself when the military's involved with it, you know?
Right. And then he's out of town or doing something else.
Yeah, he's just totally full of shit. The most popular theory, and this one is crazy, is that it was a prank played by the SAS, or Special Air Service of the British Army. According to this theory, and this is all unofficial, the SAS used to routinely attempt to enter the perimeter of RAF Woodbridge, primarily to test the security because, according to rumor for the longest time, there were nuclear warheads stored at RAF Woodbridge, which is why the U.S. was given the base, because it was a potential strike zone. It was a potential launch site to strike the USSR during the Cold War.
Wow.
And they were testing the perimeter because they were worried that if someone else tried to test the perimeter, they'd get in. So the SAS were like,
crazy.
We're going to keep testing it because we gave our base to the Americans and we want to see how well they're protecting these incredibly dangerous weapons. So at some point,
cool.
The Americans...
If it was them.
Yeah, I know. But like at some point, the Americans upgraded their radar system. And when the SAS parachuted in with black parachutes in the middle of the night to see if they had gotten better, they were greeted by a bunch of guards who then detained them. And they questioned the SAS agents for 18 hours, referring to them as, quote, unidentified aliens to excuse why they were detaining them. And they basically pretended not to know who they were, and the American interrogators beat the shit out of them for 18 hours while they
Holy
interrogated
shit.
them. Basically, because
Was it worth it?
It's not a sanctioned mission. You shouldn't be in our fucking base. And if there are nuclear warheads here, what are you doing here? They knew who they were. They pretended they didn't, and then they just beat the fuck out of them. And this is obviously a story, and I can't tell you if it's true or not, but it's a story. So after that, the British government eventually intervened and were like, let our people go. And they decided that when they were let go, the SAS people were like, we're going to pull a prank to get back on them because they kept calling us fucking aliens. So they rigged lights and colored flares in the woods along with black helium balloons that were attached to remote control kites so that it would be a bunch of lights that they couldn't explain how it was happening naturally because it wasn't. It was all planned.
Okay.
And they did it over the course of 2 nights. So this is a really good story and an unofficial one. And I'm not sure what they would have used to cause elevated levels of radiation at the landing site that was actually like measured. And you can hear them measuring it and you can hear the Geiger counter going off, which is why I'm like really skeptical of this story because it came out a lot later.
Yeah.
And the thing that's really interesting, and this is where it starts to take kind of a turn, is that Lieutenant Colonel Halt disagrees entirely with this. And he's been shit on a lot since 1980 when he sent
because
this
of
memo.
what he witnessed.
Because he basically said, this is what we saw. In 2010, 30 years later, he wrote and signed an affidavit regarding the incident. Now, I cannot speak to his personal motivations, but I gotta say the naysayers, including and especially those from the US and the UK governments, basically made a mockery of him, saying how he handled it like a buffoon because who would ever believe in UFOs? And despite the changing official story of what happened that night, Halt being shit on and what he has said are the only 2 consistent things about this story. So in his affidavit, things get really, really interesting, and I'm really excited to tell you what he said in 2010.
Go.
He's already retired at this point, okay? There is far more detail in here. He claims that in the forest, quote, the security team observed a light that looked like a large eye, red in color, moving through the trees. After a few minutes, this object began dripping something that looked like molten metal. A short while later, it broke into several smaller, white-colored objects, which flew away in all directions. Claims by skeptics that this was merely a sweeping beam from a distant lighthouse are unfounded. We could see the unknown lights and the lighthouse simultaneously. So he addresses some of the misinformation or some of the people that are trying to explain away what happened, which it could be that. You don't know, you know? But he's saying
he's
like...
a bit older now, though.
And he's saying, like, it fucking wasn't that. Stop saying it's that. He releases a statement that's, like, 12 paragraphs long. I read the whole thing, and I was like, holy shit. He goes on to describe the search they conducted of the area and how they followed the objects. Here's a specific thing he claims during this. Quote, about that same time, regarding when they were following this, someone noticed a similar object in the southern sky. It was round and, at one point, it came towards us at a very high speed. Again, that's something that was mentioned during the speculation that they were approached rapidly by one of these things that someone saw. This is his own words saying it happened, but it was from one of the lights high in the sky that was to the south. Getting back into his quote, it stopped overhead and sent down a small pencil-like sort of laser beam.
That's weird.
That illuminated the ground about 10 feet from us, and we just stood there in awe, wondering whether it was a signal, a warning, or what it was. It clicked off as though someone threw a switch, and then the object receded back into the sky. Now, we're going to get in the spot where this shit gets a little nuts.
Maybe it was like testing the ground or something?
Or it's almost like a little miniature spotlight that it keeps shining down. So he goes on to say, quote, the object then moved back towards Bentwaters and continued to send down beams of light at one point near the weapons storage area.
That's creepy.
We knew that because we could hear the chatter on the two-way radio. Several airmen present later told me that they saw the beams. I don't remember any names at this point. From my position in the forest, it appeared that one or more beams came down near the weapons storage area. At that time, the object was just north of the facility. I had a great concern about the purpose of the beams. So at this point, he's not even worried about these extraterrestrials or the UFOs. He's worried about what the hell are they looking at with those things? Or what are they using those for?
Right.
I'd like to remind you that the reason, supposedly, the SAS infiltrated the base to test the security was because nuclear weapons were supposedly held at this base, which would have been in the weapons storage area where they're shining this light.
So do you think maybe the aliens are testing, like, how far along humans are getting with their technology.
Something very creepy, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit here too, about like, this isn't the only time this has happened. So, all this stuff was speculation until he released this statement, okay? His statement continues, quote, in keeping with official... I have fucking cold chills. In keeping with official U.S. Air Force policy, I can neither confirm nor deny that the WSA held nuclear weapons. This is the guy who's in charge of the base. So he's saying, like, even though I'm retired, I cannot confirm or deny that we had nuclear weapons there. He goes on to state, however, I am aware that other former or retired U.S. Air Force security police who worked there at the time of the incident are now on the record confirming the presence of the tactical nuclear bombs in the weapons storage area. So he basically just comes out and says, I can't confirm, but it's already been confirmed. There were nukes at the base, and this thing was shining a light at where we held the nukes. He ends his statement with this, quote, I believe the objects that I saw at close quarter were extraterrestrial in origin, and that security services of both the United States and the United Kingdom have attempted both then and now to subvert the significance of what occurred at Rendlesham Forest and RAF Bentwaters by the use of well-practiced methods of disinformation, end quote. He basically said, like, something happened, it was serious, and they've just basically lied about it this entire fucking time.
That's crazy.
So, here's how I'm going to wrap this story up. The disinformation he mentions is likely his way of acknowledging other government officials who said he's full of shit, who have said he's full of shit for a very long time. There's a guy named Colonel Ted Conrad. Conrad was present at the time of the incident, and he conducted an investigation into the matter. He was interviewed in 2010 also, when like 30 years later, this shit popped off again. When he was interviewed, he said, quote, we saw nothing that resembled Halt's description either in the sky or on the ground. We had people in position to validate Halt's narrative, but none of them could. Then in a different interview in 2010, he stated about Halt specifically, quote, he should be ashamed and embarrassed by his allegation that his country and Britain both conspired to deceive their citizens over this issue. He knows better.
Wow.
So this dude is just
rude.
taking the public to shit all over him and say, like, he's full of shit. Like, he's pitching a conspiracy that never happened, which is very interesting to me.
That's some shade right there.
Because Ted Conrad was also interviewed in 1983, 3 years after the incident. And in that interview, he said, or the interview in 1983 goes like this, quote, Colonel Ted Conrad, the base commander, recalls 5 Air Force policemen spotted lights from what they thought was a small plane descending into the forest. 2 of the men tracked the object on foot and came upon a large tripod-mounted craft. So this article is quoting that he told them this, but we're going to get a direct quote here in a second. It had no windows, but was studded with brilliant red and blue lights. Each time the men came within 50 yards of the ship, Conrad relates, it levitated 6 feet in the air and backed away. They followed it for almost an hour through the woods and across a field until it took off at, quote, phenomenal speed. Acting on the reports made by his men, Colonel Conrad began a brief investigation of the incident in the morning. He went into the forest and located a triangular pattern ostensibly made with tripod legs. He did interview 2 of the eyewitnesses and concludes, quote, those lads saw something, but I don't know what it was. So, in 1983, he relayed this story to Omni magazine and told them he investigated it, and he did not know what it was. Then in 2010, after all this stuff happened, and he saw Halt get shit on, decided to join in shitting on Halt.
So fucked up.
So maybe he was massively misquoted for an article, or maybe he changed his story, but the fact that so many folks will point out regarding Halt that no one, quote-unquote, could collaborate his story is super, super suspicious to me. I think that it's just people don't realize that is a classic move of someone gaslighting someone else. You isolate them by stating that they have no support. And it is very suspicious because some people have support no matter what. And this dude was in charge of that base. So regardless of what you believe, something happened that night. It was either a hoax or lights from a lighthouse or a UFO. What's crazy to me, I am 100% sure that all the people that were involved with this, there has to be someone besides Colonel Halt, the commander of that base, who thought that what they saw was extraterrestrial. there's always going to be at least one more person who thinks, oh shit, that's an alien, you know?
Yeah.
So when you say that no one backs up his story, it's like, that's horseshit. Because it's not that they could not, it's that they would not. No one spoke out about it.
They don't want to lose their careers or whatnot either.
Exactly. Like, why would you? If the senior officer on the base was shit on that hard, the dude in charge for 40 years, what hope would someone that low on the totem pole have of speaking out and having anyone believe them? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what's interesting and creepy about this is that the UFO sightings that I was recently looking into have been increasing in frequency recently, and accounts are becoming more detailed about consistent behavior of these unidentified crafts and where they are being seen. And they are consistently being seen near military installations, and in particular, military installations that are known to house nuclear weapons. It's like, it's the same shit that happened 40 years ago, where things are happening, like observations are being made by something that no one knows what it is, and it's happening around places that nuclear weapons are present. And because it is such a matter of national security, there's no official word from any of the governments except for Italy, but I'll get to that in a different fucking thing. Italy has basically gone on record like, we have some serious incidents going on around our coast and around our military bases, and people need to start fucking talking about it right away.
What?
And it's crazy to me that, like, listening to that stuff, I was like, I need to find something about aliens. Shocker, I find something from 1980 about a military base being checked out because it housed nuclear weapons. So it is super fucking creepy to me.
That's super creepy.
There's two things I'm going to say before I finally wrap this up. So this is the Rendlesham Forest incident, and I think it's a really good story. And there are so many sides to this story, and most of those sides were not present for this incident. My side is me telling you what I read, but realistically, like, obviously I sound like something happened because that's my side, but I don't know. I wasn't there. And I will say that I was impressed that I was able to find Colonel Halt's statement and his recording, but for someone that was as high-ranking and as outspoken as he was, it would be very difficult to bury that sort of evidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
However, nothing else has ever come out for anyone that's ranked lower than him, and I think that is a very telling sign that people that don't want you to believe in something won't think you'll notice that. How suspicious that is. The second thing I'm going to say about this, and this is the creepiest part about the research.
Someone's going to call you up and be like, stop talking about it.
The second thing is, I typically look as hard as I can for any official documentation regarding any specific incident. And what was shocking to me was the frequency that when I went to websites that had sources that they were claiming and links to those sources, like official documents written or official articles written from the 80s regarding this incident, how many times I went to a website where the link wasn't broken and the page wasn't down. It just stated, quote, "This item is no longer available." And I found that over and over and over.
That's crazy.
I found that on the website of Omni, where they quoted the other colonel when he said he saw something. That article is not on the internet anymore. You can't find the fucking thing.
Because he came out and was like,
I don't know why it's not there. What I do know is that there's plenty of places that have quoted the frickin' article that state this is exactly what it is, or have like complete copy paste of what the article was. And it's very difficult to have all of those taken down. But the frequency with which I ran into this doesn't exist anymore, or this was deliberately taken down, really creeped me the fuck out. So that is how I'll end it. And that is the Rendlesham Forest incident.
Nice.
So I
Aliens.
hope you enjoyed it. Aliens. I usually text Robin and I'm like, hey, what topic are you covering? And she told me she was going to cover something. And she's like, what are you covering? I just texted her back that meme of that guy going, aliens, from the History Channel. So I really enjoyed this week, and I hope you folks enjoyed it too. And I think that's just about everything for episode 111. Robin, for folks who would like to donate to us monetarily, I know I already talked about Patreon, but how can they do so?
So you can go to Patreon, patreon.com/Scaryish podcast. Those are monthly donations, whole bunch of different tiers, whole bunch of stuff to look at. We got discount codes. We got cool pictures. We got extra little tiny bonus tidbits. We got a whole bunch of stuff. Check it out. Tiers start at $1. And then we have coffee, ko-fi.com/Scaryish podcast. Those are one-time donations. All those donations help us to upgrade our studio setup. And we thank everybody who's been donating to us, joining our Patreon. You guys are super awesome. We really couldn't do this without you. We've definitely been able to improve since we first started. We used to have just little GoPro, and now we have
little GoPro and like $20 microphones.
And now we've been able to upgrade our sound quality, things like that, and it's all
our video
thanks to you
camera
guys.
too.
Yeah,
it is absolutely thanks to you. And for those of you who are listening to the story and are like, I want to send something in, whether it was for Robin's story or my story, or you just have a ghost story or a creepy story, paranormal, whatever, please reach out to us because we do want to hear your stories. And if you want us to read them on the show, we would be more than happy to do that. You can email storytime@scaryish.com or go to facebook.com/scaryish podcast. You can message us there, or you can join the Spooky Friends group and post your story if you'd like. You can also join our Discord if you would like to do that and post your story there. The best way to do that is to go to our website, scaryish.com, and on the right-hand side, if you scroll down, you'll notice an icon for all of our social medias. Just find the Discord one and click there. On our website, you can also click Contact Us at the top and fill out a form and send it directly to us if you don't have an email address or you don't want to go to any of those aforementioned places. Or you can tweet at us at ScarishPod or message us on Instagram at ScarishPodcast. So those are all the different ways you can reach out to us. Thank you so much to everyone who listened tonight, or I guess not tonight, who just listened, period. We appreciate every single one of you sincerely from the bottom of our hearts, and that's why we just keep doing this no matter what life throws at us.
So thank you, everybody, for listening, and keep on creeping on, and we'll talk to you guys later.
Bye.